How's everybody doing today? Today I just wanted to do a quick intro video on Visual Studio 2013. This is the software that we are going to use to create all our C# programs during the semester. So if I double click on this to bring it up, this is the typical window you're going to see initially when you bring this software up. If you want to create a C# program, what you're going to do is you're going to go to File, you're going to go to New, and then you're going to go to Project. Now this next part is really crucial because C# allows you to do programs in all kinds of different languages. You have to make sure that you specify here Visual C#. And then once you specify Visual C#, you click on that, it's highlighted in blue, go over and tell it that you want to create a Windows Form application in Visual C#. Once you do that, you can name your program. One of the first ones we're going to do is miles per gallon. So I'm going to call this one MPG for miles per gallon. I can see where it is going to save it on my computer. It's going to save it to my desktop. On your computer it might save it somewhere differently, so you should take a look at this before you go to the next step, just so you know where to go back and find your program. So I've told it Visual C#, Windows Form application, Visual C#. I've given it a name. I know where it's going to save it. I hit OK. What happens next is it brings up your new program. Since C# is a visual programming language, it is quite different than Python. One of the first things you see is this form. Now a form is just a container. It's a place where you can put any of the items from the toolbox that you want to use in your form. So a lot of times when we write programs in C#, we'll use a button, because if the user clicks on the button, then code gets executed. So I'm going to go over, this is my toolbox over here. I'm going to go over and just click on a button, and just holding down my left mouse key, I drag it out, I let go of it, and now I've got a button on the screen. Okay, I can tell when the button is the active component in the form because it has all these little sizing boxes around it. If I click off this button and there's no longer the sizing buttons around it, then something else is the active component. Right now it's the form that's the active component. If I want to see the properties of this button, what I do is I click on it, and then I can go over here and I see this is my properties window. Okay, sometimes you might have to click on some different tabs to see different things. The way mine's set up, it shares this right side section with my Solutions Explorer, which tells me which files I have, and my properties window. So you may have to click on one tab or the other depending on what you want to see. I want to see properties. I click on my button and I see, wow, I've got like all these properties that relate to this one button. But don't worry, with most of the items that we drag out, there's only 2, maybe 3 properties that we ever use on any particular item. On the button, the most widely used properties are the text, that's what we want to see on the button, and the name of the button. So I'm going to go ahead and change both of these. So the text, since what I want to do with this button ultimately is calculate miles per gallon, I'm going to change the text to calculate MPG. Alright, so I changed the text to calculate MPG. The text on the button, you know, you can have spaces between it, that's fine. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go up and name the button. When you give any of these tools a name, it can't have any spaces. So I'm just going to call this one BTN Calc MPG. Now you might wonder, well, why did I call it BTN Calc MPG? Typically with all our buttons, whatever we call it, the description we have after it, we typically start it with BTN. That way I know it's a button. It's helpful when I have a larger program with a lot of different components in it. So now this button has a name, it's got text, so pretty much that's what I would typically do with a button. Depending on what you need for your form, you can drag out all kinds of things. Another typical thing that we use a lot near the beginning is we'll use text boxes. So I'm going to drag out a text box. Now a text box in a visual programming language is typically used either to display information to the user or to get information from the user. So I drag it out. If the text box is clicked on, then I can go over to my properties and I see, oh, okay, this is called it text box 1. It does have a text property. I am going to see a fair amount of overlap between the properties on my button and the properties on my text box, but there's always some unique properties to each. So there's some properties on my text box that I will not see on my button, and vice versa. So if I wanted to name my text box something, maybe I'm going to display the miles per gallon in here. So I could call it TXT MPG. So there, now it's got a name. So those are some of the things I can do with the form. Once you have all the components on your form that you want, the next thing you'll do is you'll start to write some code. Now, to write the code, most of the time, we put the code behind a button. When I say that, it means to run the program, you just click on the button to execute the code. To actually get the code behind the button, if you're saying, all right, I'm done with my form, this is all I need on it, I want to start my code, all you need to do is double click on the button. What happens then is going to open up for you a code window. And at this point you should see two tabs up here, one for your form, so you can say, oh, I want to go back to my form, and one for your code, so you can bounce back and forth. Now it's always going to have this boilerplate information up here. This is always going to be there for you. C# is a much more syntax heavy language. Syntax just means it's got a lot of little quotes and parentheses and semicolons and squiggly brackets. So it's more so than Python, but once you get used to it, it's still not too bad. What we can see here, it says public void btn calculate mpg. Remember, that's our button. That's what we call our button dash click. That means this is an area. Any code you put in here is going to be executed if the user clicks on the button. In C#, if you want to run a program, all you have to do is go up here to this icon, Start, and click on it. What happens, it runs ours, so it brings up my form, it's got my button, it's got my text box. If I click on my button, nothing happens because I haven't put any code in here, but at least you can see this is what the program would look like when it runs. I'm going to hit the X to close it, or you can hit this little square over there that also closes the run of the program. If you want to save your program, you can say File, Save All. That makes sure it's saved. Okay. If I want to get out of Visual Studio, I just say, okay, I'm all done. But what I want to show you over here, this is the little program it created, MPG. And if I dig into this folder, I see there's the actual program itself, but then there's all kinds of other files. I probably got, I don't know, 30 files. Now, if you're going to submit this as a homework assignment, what you'd need to do, this is your one little program, you'd need to create one zipped folder, okay, and then just drag this entire folder into that one zipped folder and just submit that zip folder. Anyhow, hopefully this was helpful to you in just getting an idea some of the components of Microsoft Studio. The next video I have for you is going to look more closely at the code. We're going to take that simple program, miles per gallon, and we'll look at how we did it in Python and then compare it. This is how we could do that same code in C#. Anyhow, hopefully this video was helpful. We'll see you next time.